stopped by the studio one day. I think I had just, actually, I think I had just finished a show, and I wasn't in the show the next day. So there were quite a few of us in the rehearsal room. I have a feeling that Ching's Danish had just arrived, and a fresh coffee. And Bob Costello showed up in the doorway, and he had June Julio with him and Vinnie Lascalzo, you know, our makeup man and wardrobe woman, and Jonathan Frid. He made his first appearance to all of us, the cast members. He was at the studio for makeup and wardrobe tests. And, you know, I've said this before, but he was perfectly formed as Barnabas Collins that day. He stood there with his hands, you know, resting on the wolf's head cane. He had the signet ring. He had the 6-button mod suit, the cape. He had the hair. And most of all, he had that demeanor, that really wonderful Shakespearean sort of elegance, again, old world elegance, and that kind of melancholy that I think we all associate with the Barnabas character. And he was Barnabas from the get-go, which is not to say that he didn't grow into the character and add more complexity, but he was our Barnabas right then. And we have a great deal to be thankful for Barnabas. And for Jonathan Frid, because as you all know, Jonathan saved our show from being canceled. After Jonathan came on the show, we soon had 20 million daytime viewers. So imagine, even today, how many shows would love to have that many viewers. But even more. We have something else to be very thankful to Jonathan for, because he affirmed our reputation for being the show that celebrated the other, the not us, the outlier, the outcast. He is the reason why all of those kids ran from school. I think that's why so many of you are here today. And I hear this all the time, not just I ran home from school to watch Dark Shadows, but I also hear, thank you, you got me through childhood. So I want to say a very special thank you to Jonathan for all of that. And now, of course, I look around and I see, well, there's Robert and Ansel and Sean and Patrick and Danielle, and there are so many of you, and I could probably name almost everybody in this room who watched Dark Shadows as a kid, as a youngster, and was inspired by it, and now you are inspired in your own creative expression, and that's really incredibly gratifying, I think, for us to feel. So. Well, if I had a glass of vampire wine in my hand, I would raise it. And I would say, happy birthday, Jonathan, my friend, my colleague, my sweetheart. I love you, we all do, and happy birthday. Of course.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, talking to a whole room full of Dark Shadows fans, because that's what you are.
Welcome all of you happy people, I hope.
Well, first of all, we haven't had a Dark Shadows Festival for a few years, so to be able to get together now is really special. We've been celebrating the life of Laura Parker, who passed away in October. You remember Laura, who played Angeline?
Very well.
Yes.
Very well.
And today we're celebrating the 100th birthday of the 200-year-old vampire, Barnabas Collins. Let's start with Jonathan. Do you have any special memories of Jonathan?
Oh, goodness, of course. I remember vividly that the show started on a very, very different footing. There was no vampire. It was, the gothic melodrama, the tortured, dysfunctional family in Maine, and very quirky family, I fit right in. Try to recognize all of the characters from my personal life. So I remember with the advent of when this vampire thing came, we were all sort of like, oh my, well, fits right in, I mean, why not? And so I remember meeting Jonathan the very first time, and he was an extraordinary, he had a presence, extraordinary presence, very regal, very skillful actor. It was sort of unusual to see him in that daytime TV setting. So you talk about meeting Jonathan. It was such an informal environment. I was treated as an adult from day one, which has been created a lot of trouble for me in my life. We didn't have there was no hand-holding, as you recall. I was arrived at the studio and went to my place, and we would do blocking, and it just was a process that happened. We had the assistant director was always the most important person. It was the first person we met. We started taping the floor. Remember the tape that they used to lay out on the floor of the rehearsal room of the set?
Right, and remember the folding chairs that stood in for the coffee?
The horrible folding chairs, the coffee machine, the Xerox machine. Here's an anecdote aside for you. I wonder if David Selby ever paid ABC for all the copies he made of his dissertation.
Copying the thesis for his PhD, and David, we're watching you say that right now.
You know them. It was such a remarkable experience. Okay, you asked me a question first, perhaps I'm off on a tangent, but it all comes together in terms of the memories. There's so much texture to it. Often Jonathan would be there with Kleenex and around the collar of his shirt because his makeup took longer than everybody else's.
Right. Listen, thank you so much for...
Oh, thank you for including me.
Everybody wants to know what you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Thank you.
Here we are in New York.
However, I may be here in person, but I'm with you in spirit. So let's talk about my dear friend, Jonathan Frid. I met Jonathan in 1968 when I went first to the Dog Shadow studio. He and Dr. Hoffman created me, Eve, on the operating table out of old bones that Crazy Willie found in the mausoleum. So we went out from that day on for 2 years. We had the most wonderful time at Dark Shadows. But after 3 characters and 2 years, it was over for me. And so I thought this was a wonderful experience, but I'll just go on to the next thing, and that was over. However, I was wrong, very wrong. It wasn't over at all. In a couple of years, the Dark Shadows festivals began, and that's when I really got to know Jonathan. Jonathan would bring in scenes or monologues to the convention, and he often asked one of the actors to do it with him. And so we rehearsed in his hotel room, and we got to know each other more on an intimate basis. And then he did his one-man show, and he would bring it into the convention. However, he also tried it out in many venues in New York City. And since I lived there, I went to see many, many of them. And afterwards, we'd go out for dinner with friends or fans and various people. And again, the friendship just kept growing. Then, the exciting thing happened for me, because at a Dark Shadows convention, he invited 12 of us to a luncheon. And there was David Moore, who was the head of the theater department at Georgia College. And both he and Jonathan asked me if I would want to play Eleanor of Aquitaine in The Lion in Winter with Jonathan Frid. Well, I jumped at the opportunity. Of course I said I would do it. Of course, the funny thing is, I thought that Jonathan would be playing King Henry. However, that was not true. He was going to be directing. Now, this was really exciting because I don't know how many of you know this, but Jonathan, many years before, had studied at Yale, and he got his degree in directing. But he had never directed a play professionally up until then. So I was the first person he directed, and the first big play, which was a marvelous play. And so that was a great opportunity for me, and that's when we really, really cemented our friendship, because we lived at the mansion, the governor's mansion of Milledgeville, Georgia, and we had the entire suite on the top floor, and we would rehearse ourselves, just Jonathan and me, the monologues from The Lion in Winter, because the kids were in school during the day. He had great love for his fellow man, love for his actors that he worked with all his life, love for the theater, and love for you, his dear fans. So today, as you're remembering him, after all these years he's passed, and I believe it's his 100th anniversary of his birth, just think about that love. The love he gave you, and the love I'm sure you extended out to him. Give it to everyone there at that luncheon. Have a wonderful time. I love you, and have a great day.
Of all things Jonathan Frid on his 100th birthday. Jonathan was, and will always continue to be, the linchpin of Dark Shadows. We were just fortunate enough to work with him. Now, Jonathan possessed a fabulous stage-trained voice, and ease of movement and gesture, and oh, didn't he look good in period costume? But the thing I most remember about Jonathan was his kindness, particularly when I just started. I had never done a daytime serial with a contract. It was incredible, and everyone else had been there for a great deal of time. And I walked in the room, and there was a particular director who shall remain nameless, but everybody knows who he was. And from the first day, I was so intimidated by the talent and the ease of work in that room. And I felt beyond less than courageous. And every day, this gentleman would say something to me that just broke down me as an actor. I was used to working on stage. On stage, the director is your friend. My face hides nothing. So as a few weeks went on, Jonathan took note of it and called me into his dressing room. I thought, well, now the director and the star know that I'm no good. So Jonathan had me come in and sat down, and I was nervous as all get out. And the thing I most remember, besides his kindness, was that in 1970, he had a mini fridge in his dressing room. I didn't even know what a mini fridge was. He sat down and he said, "Don't pay any attention to him." Wait. You have to pay attention to the director. He said, "Oh, pay attention to where he wants you to walk, how many stairs he wants you to go up, when he wants you to enter, but all the rest of it, forget it, you're fine." I walked out of that room, and I had courage for the next year. The last thing he said was, when the next new person comes in, he'll pick on him or her, and he won't bother you anymore. Well, that was also true. The next person was Virginia Westphal. She was starring in something 76 on Broadway, and nobody messed with Virginia. I learned a lot from John Beckman. The one story I tell often, and I'm sorry if you've heard it 50 times, it's the first big publicity tour Jonathan and I went on. Oh my. I had never flown first class. I had never been put up in a really nice hotel. We were going to Minneapolis, Minnesota to appear in the auto show. We were appearing with Tiny Tim, Miss Kitty, and the big seller, Arnold the Pig. Thank you, Catherine. She sold me a jumpsuit that was gorgeous, covered in sequins. And I thought, well, I'm going to look like $1 million sitting next to Jonathan. But I was sitting on the hood of a car that made circles endlessly, all day and most of the evening. When I finally got off that car, Jonathan's line was still going on, and they retrieved him from it because Arnold the Pig had a longer line. We were invited to dinner with Tiny Tim and Miss Piggy. That's what we called her. I have never been at a dinner like that in my life. They sat above us like royalty, and they held court, and we sat on cushions on the floor. Now, they were the most unusual people on the face of the earth, and God bless him, Jonathan got us out of there very quickly. With sense of humor, we arrived back on set, and everything was fine. Had a wonderful time. I miss you, and Jonathan is up there celebrating with Thayer and Virginia and Laura and Grayson and all the other wonderful people that we worked with. God bless you, fans. See you soon.
Really wonderful. I didn't have a lot to do with Jonathan. I was in love with the werewolf. Unfortunately, he went back to Tennessee, I think. Anyway, so I had to walk through the future, and then I was in love with Chris. So Chris Bennett, I was his lab assistant. But I worshipped Jonathan from afar. And then when they told me I was to be in the movie of House of Dark Shadows, I thought, wow, this is so exciting. So I couldn't wait. And then I got the script. And I died on the first page. Well, I was studying the method, and I worked very hard figuring how to die, what it would feel like. And I was told to lie on the pavement, and the makeup man did a beautiful job on my neck. And I did emit a scream, which, thank God, I felt I'm dying. So that was a nice moment. However, Jonathan, I just say, it was love at first sight.
You know, I was sitting here thinking, I wasn't quite an actor yet. I was watching the play The Tempest in the San Diego Shakespeare Festival. And it was just, these actors were extraordinary. And I was watching, John Voight was playing Ariel. all of a sudden, this character, this creature came from upright stage and came down and was doing his opening monologue in Caliban. And I'll tell you, I was just like, I could not believe this transformation and the truth that he was showing. And it was sympathetic. And it's the first time, and really the last time I've ever seen anybody play it with that kind of range. And I didn't know who he was. And years later, I walk into Dark Shadows and I see Jonathan Frid. And I go, oh my God. So I met him in his dressing room, and he was very gracious. He was always kind and very, very helpful. And I really enjoyed, I didn't get to know him that well as other people have. But one thing that I do hold very dear is he was coming to the last event of Dark Shadows, and I hadn't seen him in years. And I just had finished playing some music, and I came off stage, and I was standing in the hallway, and coming down the hallway was Jonathan with some people, and he looked at me and he says, "Oh, Jimmy Store, how are you?" He said, "Jonathan is," he says, and he started going on about the last time we met, which was on 46th Street and Lexington Avenue, and he asked, "How is Jonathan, my oldest son, who had just been born?" It was like a memory I will never, ever forget. He knew my wife's name, he knew my son's name, he knew what was going on. He was just extraordinary meeting with him, and I was so taken back by it, and it's always been his Caliban and that are my two favorite ideas of Jonathan, and it's an honor and a really wonderful privilege to be here, to be connected with this show for so many years, and your love is just extraordinary, and I thank you so much, and I say happy birthday to an extraordinary actor. Thank you.
Roger Davis. I had this great scene at the end of House of Dark Shadows. Remember when I killed the vampire?
Yes.
Well, you know, people say that the atmosphere doesn't really help, but the atmosphere is everything. And man, that house, and oh, it was so wonderful. And I'm way up at the top there with the crossbow, and Jonathan's down here, and Catherine's laid out on the, and there's just everything was right. And Curtis is over on one side, and he's going, and so I started drawing back the bow, and Jonathan, with that incredible voice, oh my God, the converter scared the shit out of me. And really, and I just stopped, and then he's I didn't know what he was doing, but he starts going like this. Well, I just followed him, you know, oh, okay. So I just come down, and as I'm coming down, he's falling with his eyes, and he's bringing me right down. And when I get up, he goes, "You ought to go remember this. Every wedding needs a witness, Clark." Nobody can do this voice. Every wedding needs a witness, Clark, and you shall be witness to mine. Okay? Now, the camera's rolling. We're still going. Okay? And they decided to, since it was so important, I remember we cut, and we were going to set up for all of the paraphernalia that was on Jonathan, because this stake was going to come out of his heart, and I had this thing in my hand, and the stake that was going to drive into it. And Dan Curtis takes me aside and he says, when you get up to him, really, really drive him forward with everything you've got. And I go, oh man. Come on, Dan, you don't do this with Jonathan. You know, I mean, he goes, just do it. I don't want to tell him because I don't want him to know what you're going to do. Well, giving Roger Davis the okay to, I don't know if any of you remember, when I grabbed Joan Bennett, and she fell straight back, and a little flask fell out of her on the floor. And she's grabbing around for the flask. Of course, she never spoke to me again. Believe me. No. So I go out, I have the steak, and I think, all right, action. And man, I came up behind Jonathan, and I took my fist. I drove my fist into his back. I lifted him up, everything I could. And he was arching, remember? Yeah. He's arching. I was, man. And the blood spurted. It was one take. One incredible take where everything worked. Boy, you search for those. And there aren't many in a career where everything happens right. That was a moment. And so now, it's over, everyone's loving it, and Jonathan turns around to me. And he says, you really pushed me. And I don't know what he's going to do, okay? Because his hands were twice the size of my hand. If you want to remember, Jonathan was a massive man, big. He wasn't tall, but he was very strong. Now he's slowly turning around to face me, okay? And he says, seething, that hurt. And I'm thinking, the next thing he's going to just smash me right in the face. And he steps back and he says, thank you.
Okay, we have time for fielding a few questions. If you raise your hand, and let's get right up here with the green.
Should I stand up? This question is for David Selby. I was wondering, I really like the part of 1897 where you're possessed by Count Potofi, switch bodies with him. I was wondering if you had any particular memories of, working with Thayer David at that time as Potofi, or just, what it was like then.
Did you have any memories?
Thayer David.
Thayer David from Dark Shadows?
Yeah, as especially like as Potofi, because it's very fun.
Coffee.
Yeah, it's a fun art to watch.
Yeah. Thayer was wonderful. As everyone knew Thayer, he had a presence about him that was just when the moment he got off the elevator. And years later, I just can't remember what thing we did, but I did get to, as periodically happens with all of us, we run into each other if we're fortunate. A lot of times we do. And I did run into Thayer subsequently down the road doing another thing. And, he was terrific. Don't know what else to say.
Thank you.
Yes.
the black shirt.
I was really surprised a couple of last year when I went on YouTube, and you guys did your version of A Christmas Carol. And you were amazing as Ebenezer Scrooge. Just the whole cast. And what's really nice is that Mitch Ryan was a part of that too. And how was that formed? How did that come about? And is it available for us to? Does anyone know if it's available that we can get a copy of that instead of looking for on YouTube or anything like that? But I really enjoyed it, you guys. It was absolutely wonderful.
You know what we should do, probably, and we should speak to Todd about, Todd about it, about putting it out there for people to get, you know, because it's not going to be, but I don't know whether it'll certainly should be shown in Christmas, but it's also, I don't know, I had a great time. We all did doing that, but I certainly appreciate you seeing it, and you know.
Yeah, Todd again, we keep mentioning him, but he's the one that kind of facilitated it. But it was a perfect opportunity to get all of the Dark Shadows actors part of it. And I'm just so thrilled that Mitch Ryan was able to join us.
How did that whole idea come about?
Well, it's something Dan Curtis wanted to do. And I think he mentioned that when we had the big Paley Museum of TV and Radio.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I helped facilitate that in the beginning. I really felt that it was, we hadn't had a festival in a long time, and it just seemed like a good idea. And remember, we were in the midst of COVID and everything. It was just a great opportunity for all of us to get together and do something creative and remind you that we were all still around. I couldn't be happier that we did it, and the timing was perfect. And we got, you know, David Hennessy on board, and Alexandra Isles, and Nancy Barrett. So I think it was just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was great.
Do we have another question? Okay, yes, Lorette.
For those of you who are fortunate enough to play multiple roles, what was your favorite role that you played, and why was it your favorite?
Okay. He wanted to know, out of all the characters, since most of you played multiple characters or different versions of yourself. Now, Lisa, you played two different Sabrinas. So did you prefer the first one with Don Briscoe and Roger being your brother, or being the lab assistant with Chris Pinnock? Doing a seance.
I would have to say the first one was my most exciting one.
Yeah.
It was my first time on Shadows, and I loved giving him that birthday party when he turned into a werewolf. But my whole part went out the window when he left, so that was very sad. I did go through another window and to work with Chris, or I was his lab assistant. And Chris and I have been very good friends, and and Mitch and I did a film where we both in, Salome Jens directed, called Ceremony for a Midget, and I don't know quite how to get that. It's a wonderful film, but a story by James Leo Herlihy. It's a really nice film. Anyway.
Well, that's great. And now, Roger, are you?
You mean, well, this home. You all see me in back? I don't have to stand up, do I? No. Okay.
Close.
Now look, Peter Bradford. Jeff Charles Delaware Tate. The ghost of Charles Delaware Tate. Ned Stewart. Dirk Wilkins. Now, of all of those, what was the most fun? All right, look. What's the most fun character to play on a vampire show?
Vampire.
Damn right. I got to do Dirk Wilkins and play the vampire, it was great fun. And I really did have a wonderful time. However, in the beginning with Peter Bradford and my relationship with Alexander Mulkey, and it just sort of worked, it felt really comfortable. I'd never, I was coming off the last show that I had done prior to coming on here to do Dark Shadows was a Twilight Zone, lead on the Twilight Zone, Diana Hyland. And Diana Hyland was tough. She was really tough. And we had this scene where I came in as an alcoholic. And I thought, I had been to a party. Now I know I'm dropping names. I'd been to a party that Jack Nicholson had the night before, and we had been in acting class together. And he said, "You're doing that Twilight Zone. Why the hell don't you do that bit you did in class with Long John Silver?" And I had this bit. So I came in as a drunk. 40 years have passed, and I'm now a drunk. And Diana Hyland doesn't know what I'm going to do. I was supposed to just kind of waltz across the set and go over to her and be sort of happily drunk and go, "How you doing?" Whatever. And I came out of the wings and I said, "Land hard as shit lying in the room, the white waves, leaking in a sandy shore, treasure island. We would get the treasure too, if it hadn't been for young Jim Hawkins. I can hear him now telling Captain Smollett and Dr. Livesey. I heard Silver. I heard Silver out on the bay. I heard they're going to take over the Hispaniola, hide her in the cave. We won't find her in 100 years. Are you sure, Jim?" Now, I just did this, okay? And Diana Hyland's on the sofa, and she looks at me and she goes, "What in the world? What was that?" and the director said, No, I like it. Let's just pick up. Roger will drop into the close-up, and we'll just pick up the scene. And it was a hell of a moment. It was a rainy day, and there was a guy sitting next to me, and I had read lines with him earlier, and he had a raincoat and a hat pulled down. I wasn't paying any attention, and I said, "Did you read the lines with me?" And we read the lines, and he handed me back my script, and he said, "You don't know these. Good luck. You don't know your lines, good luck." And then, so I went off, we did a blocking rehearsal, and then I came back to look for him, and he was gone. So, and then I did the scene, and the next day, I get a call, and it says, "MGM's on the line." And I go, "MGM's on the line? Who the hell is MGM?" So I get on the line, and I said, "Is this MGM?" And she says, "Yes, just a moment, sir. You're Roger Davis." I said, "Yeah." And so I get on, and it's the guy. And he says, "Gee, I watched the scene. How'd you learn your lines? I mean, you seem to know them." And I said, "I don't know, when the camera starts rolling, something happens. Risibility, remember? Okay?" And I said, "How are you calling me? What do you do at MGM?" And he said, "Well, I produced Twilight Zone." And I go, "No, Rod Serling produces Twilight Zone." And he goes, "That's right." And I go, You're Rod Serling?" "That's right." And he said, "Good luck with the rest of the show."
David, once you got to speak on the show, I'm sure that was your highlight.
What highlight of what?
Well, in other words, he had asked the favorite characters. You played different variations of Quentin.
Oh. Quentin was wonderful. That's all I got to say.
Give him the script. It's given him a manuscript.
Did you like reciting the lyrics to the song? Shadows of the Night.
What, Shadows of the Night?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What was it like working with Daphne?
Shadows of the night calling me to you.
No, what it was acting with Daphne.
Kate Jackson. Kate Jackson.
What was it like acting with Daphne?
Kate Jackson.
Oh, we had a good time. She was terrific, and she went on. She went on with that.
Or a man woman at heart.
Well, since today is all about Jonathan, well, my very favorite scene that I ever did on Dark Shadows of, well, how many did I do? 500 or whatever. Was the scene where Maggie Evans first meets Barnabas, and he shows up at the diner. And that's still my favorite scene. We didn't know each other at all. We really did meet as strangers. And there was just something lovely about that scene where there was just a lovely chemistry. And I think I think that Dan Curtis saw that and recognized the chemistry there. And I think it's probably why I got to play Josette. And it's why so many other things happened, that wonderful storyline. But I did enjoy working with Jonathan. He was so warm and just giving. He was a wonderful, generous actor. And we were all blessed to have him come on the show. I said earlier, he saved our show from extinction. But we have such a lot to thank him for. You know, very often we were very much an ensemble. There was no star in the show. But when Jonathan came on board, he was kind of like, would you say, captain of the ship, I guess. There was just something about him that he was kind of the glue. He became the glue. And we've got a lot to celebrate with Jonathan. So anyway, this is about Jonathan, and I'm really happy to be able to talk about that favorite scene that I did. Yes, I loved doing Josette and Rachel and David, you know, I think I was most at home, and really loved everything about Maggie Evans. She was aspirational, and what a wonderful thing to play. But you always knew that Maggie had her eye on, you know, the next thing. That was lovely to play.
I played one character. It's a real rare one there. Actually, I was in the middle of the wardrobe doing a new wardrobe when I got the call that the show was canceled, so that was the end of my second character. But it was, you know, doing the show for years, it was just fantastic. Anyway, it was, you know, I was sitting here with all these people that were on the show, and the line at one time was quite large, and unfortunately, you know, sadly, that, you know, some wonderful people have passed and moving on. But,
did anything ever happen spooky on the set?
did anything happen? What?
Did anything spooky ever happen on the set?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Spooky.
Spooky? Yeah, I got knocked out. We were talking about Daphne earlier, and it was a scene where I grabbed her and I threw her down on the bed. And before, I mean, she had hit the bed, and before you know it, the censors were right there in the studio saying, you can't do that. You can't throw, you know, it was a sexual thing, and it was just crazy. But they had said, no, you can't do it. So they said, well, take this bottle. It's a breakaway bottle. And, you know, hit him. And she was brand new on the show, and she was very nervous about it. And Henry Kaplan was directing it. And Henry had the patience of no one. And she said, no, I don't know. He said, oh, darling, just hit him. Don't worry about it, just hit him. And she said, well, okay, all right. And just before we went on to do the scene, she said, I really don't, darling, you just hit him, that's all. You know, you say your cue and you whack it. Well, she did.
But she hit me with the bottom of the bottle, which was solid glass, I mean spun glass. And down I went. Next thing I woke up in the emergency room, which was down the street, with 8 stitches. And that's the first time I ever saw Dan Crew. He was on the set, and he was a little panicked. But it was yeah, I mean, to this day, she felt really badly about it. But, you know, those things happen. Anyway, she was wonderful to work with. She was a lot of fun. She had a great outlook towards life, and I was really happy to see her moving on and doing some wonderful things. And, you know, we all just wish her well, and hope someday that we'll see her and talk to her. So, anyway, thank you, folks. Thank you so much, Lisa, Roger, David, Catherine, and Jim.